Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. As always, we're coming to you with exciting Commander gameplay every week, so let's see what everyone brought to the table this time. First up is Jake on Gavi, Nest Warden. This Jeskai deck is focused around cycling, using Gavi to reduce the cost of cycling abilities and drawing lots of cards. He starts the game with an Island, a Plains, Arcane Signet, Izzet Signet, Neutralize, Slice and Dice, and Valiant Rescuer. Next up is Jason on Hazezon Tamar. This Naya deck is focused all around lands, hoping to make an army of tokens using his commander, while also ramping up powerful game-ending threats. His hand is a Snow-Covered Forest, Canopy Vista, Temple Garden, Collective Voyage, Springbloom Druid, Mentor of the Meek, and Avenger of Zendikar. Our third player today is Logan on Mogis, God of Slaughter. This Rakdos deck hopes to make no friends and cause every player massive amounts of pain through effects that trigger whenever opponents make any game actions or even attempt to breathe. His opening hand has a Swamp, a Mountain, Tainted Peak, Thought Vessel, Thrain Dynamo, Fiery Confluence, and Sulfuric Vortex. Last is Sam on Chishiro, the Shattered Blade. This Gruul deck is focused around modifying creatures in order to amass a board of tokens and power up some strong creatures. He keeps a hand with Game Trail, Stomping Ground, Rootbound Crag, the Ozolith, Grumgully the Generous, Goblin and Archomancer, and Toski, Bearer of Secrets. We're about to hop right into the game, but before that, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We post new gameplay videos every week and new episodes of our podcast every other week, so you won't want to miss it. Links to the deck list, our social media, and our public Discord server are in the description. Our channel is all supported with Dragon Shield, so if you're looking to pick up any new sleeves or match-related products, check out our affiliate link in the description. Now, on to the gameplay.
It looks like Jake is the winner of today's die roll. He'll play an island and then pass. Jason will play his Canopy Vista tapped and then pass to Logan. He'll play his basic Swamp and then pass to Sam. Sam will play Game Trail, revealing Stomping Ground so it enters untapped. He'll then tap for 1 and cast Ozolith. The turn will then be passed back to Jake, who plays a Plains, taps for 2, and casts an Arcane Signet. And then he'll pass the turn to Jason. Jason will play a Mountain as land for turn, and then tap for 1 to cast Collective Voyage. It'll resolve, and Jason puts 1 mana into it, and he's able to convince both Logan and Jake to also put a mana into it, so everyone will get to search up for 3 basic lands and put them to the battlefield tapped. After this, the turn is then passed, and Logan will play a Tainted Peak as land for turn. He'll then tap for 4 mana to cast a Thran Dynamo, and then tap the Thran Dynamo to cast a Thought Vessel. He'll pass the turn after that, and Sam will start his turn off with the Yavimaya. He'll then tap for 2 to cast a Goblin and Archomancer, and thanks to it, he's able to tap for 2 more to cast a Grumgully. He'll then shift the turn to Jake, who starts off with an Izzet Signet, and then casts his commander, Gavi. He'll then free cycle a Smoldering Crater, drawing another card, and making a 2/2 Cat Dinosaur. The turn will then be passed. Jason will start his turn off with a Snow Forest, and then taps for 3 to cast a Mentor of the Meek. He'll then tap for 3 more and cast a Springbloom Druid, sacrificing one of his Snow Forests when it enters. He'll then search his library up for a regular forest and a regular plains. He'll then move to end step, and Jake will use Gavi to free cycle and neutralize. Now in Logan's turn, he'll start off with a basic Mountain. He'll then tap his Thran Dynamo to cast an Arcane Signet and have 1 floating. He'll then use it and 2 more to cast Mogis. And with Mogis, I'm only going to be announcing when people sacrifice a creature to it or if a trigger is missed. And same with the Sulfuric Vortex that Logan now casts. He'll then pass the turn to Sam. And Sam will start off with a Rootbound Crag, then cast his commander, Chishiro. And he'll enter with a 1/1 counter. He'll then cast a Toski, Bearer of Secrets, which also enters with a +1/+1 counter, and then moves to combat. He'll swing Grumgully and an Archomancer at Logan for 5 damage. He can't block it, and when they connect, Sam will draw 2 cards. He'll then move to end step and put an additional counter on Chishiro and Toski. The turn is now Jake's, and he'll start off by sacrificing his 2/2 to Mogis, and then plays a Mystic Monastery as land for turn. He'll then drop one of my favorite creatures, a Surly Badgersaur, and I apologize in advance for you not being able to see it. He'll then tap for 2 more and cast a Fluctuator, a great card in this deck. Jake will then cycle his Slice and Dice, drawing a card and dealing 1 to everything. This will cause him to make a 2/2, fight Goblin and Archomancer, and this will also kill the Springbloom Druid. He'll then free cycle a Valiant Rescuer, a Drannith Stinger, and a Shredded Sails, netting him 2 +1/+1 counters, and gives Surly Badgersaur the opportunity to fight, but he decides not to. Because of the Slice and Dice, fighting anything on the battlefield means the Surly Badgersaur also dies. So Jake decides to just move to combat and swings Gavi at Logan, and then after that, he'll pass the turn. It is now Jason's turn, and he'll play Scavenger Grounds. Then immediately tap for 7 mana to cast his commander. And Hazezon, while 7 mana, still only has 2 power, so Jason will pay the extra 1 to draw a card off Mentor of the Meek. He'll then move to combat and swing the Mentor at Logan. Moving instep now, Jake free cycles a Vizier of Tumbling Sands. Badgersaur gets a counter, and he'll untap Arcane Signet. He'll also cycle a Radiant Judgment, causing Surly Badgersaur to fight Grumgully, and then he'll draw a card, and this is his second card, so he gets a 2/2. He then passes priority, and the turn is now Logan's. Logan immediately decides there's too many good artifacts on the field, so he casts Fiery Confluence, destroying Ozolith, Fluctuator, and Arcane Signet. Jake obviously has some responses, and he'll start off by free cycling Sweltering Suns with Gavi. When it gets discarded, Badgersaur fights Mentor of the Meek. He'll then free cycle a Reconnaissance Mission, declining to fight, and making it 2/2. The Confluence will then resolve, and Logan will tap for 3 more mana and drop a Toxic Deluge, paying 6 life to it, wiping the entire board. The turn is then passed to Sam, who starts off by shocking in a Stomping Ground. He'll then tap for 3 mana and drops a Fertilid, and it'll enter with 2 +1/+1 counters. He'll then pay 3 more to cast an Invigorating Hot Springs. This will give his Fertilid haste, so he'll remove a counter from the Hot Springs to put another one on there, and then he'll move to combat, swinging at Logan. The turn will then be passed to Jake, who starts off with an Exotic Orchard as land for turn. Then tap for 4 and cast Braylon, and when Braylon enters the battlefield, Jake gets to search for Shabraz the Sky Shark, and put it to his hand. Jake will pass the turn after that. Now at the beginning of Jason's upkeep, Hazezon's ability will trigger, even though he's not on the battlefield, and Jason gets 8 1/1s. Now in his main phase, he'll tap for 4 and cast an Oracle of Moldiah. Now for the top of his library, Survey says, Ramenup Excavator. Jason will then play a tapped Temple Garden and a Snow-Covered Forest as his 2 land drops for turn. He'll then tap for 4 more and cast a Panharmonicon, then pass the turn to Logan. Logan, having to be the one to police this game, immediately drops a Damnation, and I can't blame him. There's a lot of creatures on the board, and he has no blockers. Logan still has 1 colorless floating from his Thran Dynamo, so he'll play a Blood Crypt tapped, and then tap for 4 more to cast a Tergrid God of Fright. Jake is absolutely terrified of that Tergrid because he loves discarding cards, but he really can't do anything about it. So Logan will just pass the turn to Sam after this. Sam will start off by tapping his Yavimaya for a green mana, and then play a Gruul Turf as land for turn, bouncing the Yavimaya to his hand. He'll then tap for an additional 5 mana to recast Chishiro. He'll then activate his Hot Springs to put a counter on Chishiro, and then Sam will move to combat and swing him at Logan. Logan has an internal dialogue and entire character training arc to decide whether or not he wants to block this with Tergrid. 5 damage is actually a lot to him now, so ultimately he decides to, and Tergrid will die to this. Sam will then move to his end step and misses his Chishiro trigger, but he will get reminded of it before his next turn. The turn is then passed to Jake, who will start off with a Shivan Reef. He'll then tap for 7 mana to recast Gavi. After this, he'll free cycle a Miscalculation to draw a card and get a 2/2. With nothing left to do, Jake will pass the turn to Jason. And if you remember Jason's starting hand, you'll know he's got that Avenger, and so he slams it, with a Panharmonicon out. When it enters, he'll get 20 plant tokens, and of course when you make that land drop with it, he'll drop a Ramenup Excavator, and then play the Snow-Covered Forest he sacrificed earlier from his graveyard. And this will get all 20 of his plants a 1/1 counter. The turn is then passed to Logan, and he's crossing his fingers for a 3rd board wipe. But he was empty-handed before this, and the only thing he's able to top deck is a Zozu the Punisher. The turn is then passed to Sam, who starts his turn off with another Snow Mountain, taking 2 from Zozu. He'll then cast his finest pair of Lizard Blades. When they enter the battlefield, Chishiro will make it 2/2. And Sam ultimately decides to not swing this turn, so he'll pass. And Chishiro will get a counter on instep. The turn is now Jake's, and he'll start off by tapping for 5 and casting Shabraz, hoping to gain a little life when he draws cards, but there is a Sulfuric Vortex in play. The turn will then be passed to Jason. And now in his upkeep, Jason decides whether or not he wants to sacrifice anything to Mogis. Ultimately, he decides not to. Now in his main phase, Jason will tap for 3 and cast a Fires of Yavimaya. He'll then move to combat and marches 20 1/2 plants all the way over to Jake's face. Jake decides that 20 is too much, but he'll gladly take 18, putting his commander and his 2/2 in front of 1 each. After dealing 18 to Jake, Jason will move to post combat, tap for 5, and cast a Mind's Eye. The turn will then be passed to Logan, and when he draws for turn, Jason will pay 1 to draw his own card. Logan is relatively silent when he draws the top card of his deck, and everybody wonders what it is. Logan decides to not play it because he says it'll essentially give Jason the win, so he'll just pass the turn to Sam. And when Sam draws for turn, Jason will pay 1 again. Sam is then able to draw the exact card he needs to deal with Jason. He'll tap for 8 mana and drop Craterhoof Behemoth. He'll then play a Yavimaya's land for turn, taking 2 to Zozu. And after doing some math, everyone finds out that if he equips the Lizard Blades to Chishiro, Sam will technically do an extra 1 point of damage. So he'll reconfigure it onto Chishiro, and then activate his Hot Springs to put an extra counter on Chishiro. And then moves to combat, swinging Chishiro and Craterhoof Behemoth at Jason, and then his 6/6 Spirit at Logan. Logan just takes the damage, and Jason will put both of his creatures underneath Chishiro, and then sacrifice Fires of Yavimaya to buff his Avenger of Zendikar and just barely survive. Sam is now completely tapped out and has nothing left to do, so he'll pass to Jake. And on upkeep, Jake will sacrifice his 2/2 to Mogis. And then when he draws for turn, he'll put a 1/1 counter on Shabraz, and Jason will pay 1 to also draw a card. Jake unfortunately has been getting some pretty bad draws, just lands in hand, and not wanting to play them and die to Zozu, Jake will just pass the turn. And Jason, on his upkeep, with the Sulfuric Vortex and Mogis trigger on the stack, will max cast a Chord of Calling, and the X will be 8. He's really just trying to see if there's anything he can do to survive here. And after searching for quite a while, he gets very excited and puts an Arboreal Grazer into play. Unfortunately, Jason will die in his upkeep to Sulfuric Vortex, so the turn will now be passed to Logan. And I'm sure you've noticed, the video's getting kinda short. Logan surely couldn't have found anything, passes the turn to Sam, and Sam kills everyone with combat damage, right? Wrong. Logan taps for 12 mana and plays everybody's favorite black finisher, Torment of Hailfire. The X in this will be 10. This is the card that Logan actually drew last turn and didn't cast because if he had, he would have surely just won Jason the game. Sam has enough to sacrifice and discard to survive it too, but unfortunately Sulfuric Vortex and Mogis are still out, and Jake just doesn't have enough to live. So this just wins Logan the game on the spot. Congrats, man! Well everyone, there you have it. Mogis wins today, but everybody had a fair shot at some point. I personally really enjoyed it as I was narrating. It's always nice to see those surprise wins out of nowhere from an unexpected player. If you enjoyed it, let us know by leaving a like and commenting about it down below. And be sure to check out that big bundle of links in the description as well. I'd also like to invite each and every one of you to our public Discord for community game nights. We do them at least once a week. Come join us. But now, unfortunately, this is the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a smooth day.